Welcome back to our in-out crowd. Even though we are still staying in, we are still very much out. And especially this week because we are kicking off a week-long digital event celebrating and commemorating LGBTQ plus History Month. We are specifically looking at the impact that queer culture has had on the mainstream with everything from music, fashion, comedy, art, and so much more. We honour all of those that came before us by wearing tight trousers, loud shirts, exquisite hairdos, and of course, most importantly, lip-syncing Lady Gaga lyrics behind our masks in public while waiting for the bus stop. Including honouring those that came before us as part of Queer History Month, I have decided to take it upon myself to wear the Pride flag colours each day of this week, starting off, of course, as you can see, with red. And the original Pride flag, designed in the 1970s, 1978, I believe, to be specific, red symbolised life, meaning both in the sense of, oh, honey, you're giving me life, but also in remembrance for the lives lost in our community, the life we continue to live proudly, and also for the lives of those all around us.
And as you can see, I've got my little glittery MC hat on, which can only mean one thing. It's performance time, darlings. Thanks to funding from the National Lottery Heritage Fund, Shaper Caper has spent the last 18 months working on Hear Me Out, an LGBTQ+ oral history project aiming to capture stories about LGBTQ+ lives. And what fabulous lives they are. This week, we are delighted to premiere short films each day that are drawn from the stories we conducted. Here is the first of those films, called Life in Colour. We hope you enjoy.
talking about the lives around us and community, we are joined by a fabulous little community, which is the In Out Crowd Studio audience, whom I would like to join with us today. We have got the absolute veterans at this point, Thomas Small and Eleanor Walker, but we also have a very special guest joining us this week, Eliana Perusi. So I would like to just invite you all to, in case anyone's watching, never seen this before, just give a little hello and who you are and what you do. Let's start with Eleanor.
Okay, cool. Hello, I'm Eleanor, and I am the new LGBTQ plus projects assistant with Shaper Caper, which means I get to help out with all the cool projects like the In Out Crowd.
Yes, she's got a title now, so everybody watch out.
Hi guys, my name is Eliana. I just joined Shaper Caper for my 2-week placement, and yeah, I'm really excited. I'm backstage looking at how everything is made. It's so interesting. Yeah, let's see.
Interesting, stressful, eye twitch inducing, but always fabulous.
Hello, I'm Tommy. I'm Artistic Director of Shaper Caper, and it's great to be here with an even bigger crowd than before. How exciting, we're growing every week.
I know, just like a good hemorrhoid growing every week. Put a little bit of glitter on it, and that's basically the In Out Crowd there in a nutshell. We have, of course, got some fantastic special guests tonight on our Raising Lays and Current Affairs. We've got the wonderful Becky Kaufman, who we showed a little snippet of an interview last time on the In Out Crowd, and we are also joined by another fabulous organisation based in Scotland helping our community, which we'll find out who they are in just a moment. But we also have lots of other special guests for our history event this week. We have got Dundee drag queen extraordinaire, Miss Peaches. We have got some teachers joining us who we've worked with before from Downfield Primary and also from Braveview High School. And we are also joined by Mamoru, who is an artist making work for young people, specifically children. We also have got the amazing Jake Evans, who is a dancer that we have actually worked with before, who is a contemporary Vogue maestro. And then finally on Friday, we have also got just words can't describe her, Jo Clifford, who will be joining us for a little bit of a chat. And everyone mentioned may or may not be bringing a wee performance along with us. So we'll just need to tune in and see what's happening there. Everyone, any of those particular, of course, we're looking forward for everybody. Of course, that's a given. But is there any one particular person that you're particularly looking forward to seeing, Eleanor?
Yeah, I've seen Jo Clifford before live, and she is phenomenal. So I'm really looking forward to her, to her monologue or performance preview she gives us. I'm really looking forward to that.
You and me both. Eliana, anyone you're particularly gravitating towards?
Yeah, same as you said, Alex. I think I'm looking forward to everything. I think this week is going to be so educational, especially the interview you're having with the school idea.
Yes. No, that's it. You know, it's all just kind of an idea floating around in the ether. We don't want to give too much away, you know. Yeah. Then people might go, oh, you know, it's like when you read the blurb in Sky and you're like, oh, well, I don't need to watch it now. I've already read what happens. Thomas.
Well, I'm really looking forward to seeing Jake, because I am obsessed with all things Vogue. That may or may not have started with my obsession with Madonna and, you know, her cashing in, ka-ching, with the Vogue kind of movement. And yeah, I'm just really looking forward. I've seen lots of stuff that Jake has done online, and he's just extraordinary. And I've also worked with Jake in a studio, and he's just a really brilliant person to work with. He's a really brilliant artist, and I'm really looking forward to what he's bringing on Thursday.
Absolutely. Well, I don't want to be like, oh, you know, full circle, everyone gets a mention, but genuinely really, really excited to be face-to-face, well, digitally face-to-face with Miss Peaches, because, well, it wouldn't have been, I was going to say last year, but last year we don't talk about last year. The last year before that, Miss Peaches hosted Dundee Pride, and they were just so brilliant. She was like so warm, just had that Dundee charm, but also like just totally glamorous and gorgeous. And it's just, yeah, I just love that kind of style of drag particularly. I think Scottish queens always do it the best. Come on, Lawrence Chaney and Ellie Diamond. Anyway, really looking forward to chatting to Miss Peaches, because I'm sure she won't be far behind on the old drag racing. Now, of course, with all of that, we have got Drag Race, we've got Pose, we've got all of these amazing positive influences in our community, but that doesn't mean that all of the work is finished, and there's always new things to be chatting about within our community. And I think that we're going to have a wee look at them on tonight's news and weather. Girl. It's raining men. Hallelujah, it's raining men. First up tonight, we have got a little bit of sunshine peeking through those old snow clouds, as last Monday SNP saw a frontbencher being removed from said front bench. That person was Joanna Cherry, pictured here, showing us just how much tolerance and respect she has for particularly the trans community. Not as a direct result, however, of her stance on transgender law reform, but it was also due to her disruptive and allegedly bullying behaviour towards other members of staff. Now, despite my own personal views on Joanna Cherry, she has also received horrendous abuse online, including threats to her life and safety, which is completely unacceptable, and we do not wish that on anybody. However, we're pleased there's been appropriate response taken by the Scottish Government to show that there is a zero tolerance towards transphobia or any sort of hatred towards the trans and non-binary community, and we do feel that the overall transgender law reform with relation to hate crimes is something that is a positive step forward for our community, and we do not wish any hatred towards Joanna Cherry at all. We also have a beautiful rainbow cascading across the sky, as unfortunately Maureen Cohen, who was the UK's first openly lesbian MP, has unfortunately passed away at the age of 92. Labour politician Maureen Cohen represented Northampton North from 1974 to 1979, and she campaigned heavily on gender issues. Current Labour leader Keir Starmer called her a champion of women's rights who, quote, faced awful discrimination, including from within our party, but her courage paved the way for all those who came after. We couldn't agree with that statement more. We thank Maureen Cohen for all of her time that she served in government, and we wish her family the best of luck as they move forward with their grief. And again, we thank all of those who came before us for their work in making today a better and brighter place for our queer youth to live. There is also a pinker hue in the sky, which means that despite lockdown, two major organisations are still supporting our community where we need it most, particularly for our trans and non-binary siblings. The Scottish Trans Alliance and Pink Saltire are making waves in building and supporting us all through these tough times, especially recent tough times over the last year, which shall remain nameless. So we're going to have a deeper dive into that on our current affairs section, or as we like to call them, our raisin liaisons. So this is the section of the programme where we like to take a deep dive into an organisation or a subject that requires a bit of a spotlight in our LGBTQ+ community. And this week we are incredibly lucky to be joined across the world by the wonderful Becky Kaufman from the Scottish Trans Alliance. So hello Becky, how are you doing?
Hi Alex, how are you?
I'm doing very, very well, thank you. Again, really, really pleased to be chatting to you, and yeah, again, thank you so much for joining us, even though there's a bit of a time difference. We much appreciate it.
Yeah, just so people know, when you say from halfway around the world, I'm currently in South Africa. I had to dash down here to care for a family member, but thanks to the lovely internet, I'm still able to be with you back in Scotland. And Technology, love it when it works.
I think we'll just start off then just by giving yourself just a brief introduction of who you are and what the work that you do with the Scottish Trans Alliance is, in case anyone watching isn't aware of what the Scottish Trans Alliance is.
Well, the Scottish Trans Alliance has been in existence since 2007. We have the distinction of being the first transgender-specific charity funded by a national government anywhere in Europe, and we've been in continuous operation since 2007. We currently consist of a staff of 3 people, our manager Vic, myself who does justice and general policy, and our community engagement officer, Oceana. And we work to improve the voices of trans people, whether it be with the government about pending legislation, with public bodies about how trans people should be treated in different sectors, or even with private businesses giving advice and instruction and guidance, forgive me, about how trans people want to be treated and how they expect to be treated and what our rights are in various situations. The other thing that we do a lot of is we try to create a platform for the broader most members of the trans community to engage with these people, with the government, with public bodies and public facing businesses that they wouldn't necessarily have the ability to do on their own as an individual. We consult with the community about what their needs are and what their wants are, and we try to then bring that case in front of various people and try to work really hard to make that better. So that's what Scottish Trans does. And I, by this point in the conversation, you'll have quickly picked up that I'm not originally Scottish. Unless you go back 3 generations, it turns out that my grandfather's grandfather was actually born in Leith, probably 3 blocks from where my current office is. Small world.
Absolutely.
But yeah, so I retired from a career in the United States and moved to Scotland to work on my master's degree, which I've subsequently gotten a couple master's degrees from University of Aberdeen. And I got involved with Scottish Trans Alliance back in 2013. And it happened to be that my career back in the United States, I worked in the prison service in the state of Wisconsin. And because I also I basically grew up in a police station. My dad was a police chief in a small town in the upper Midwest in the US. And so I understand how that part of the system works. And because I am that unique combination of a person who understands how the criminal justice system works, and I'm also a trans person and an advocate for equality and human rights, I found myself in the somewhat unenviable position of having to be the person to go in front of the various criminal justice agencies and tell them they're getting it wrong. Now, when they get it right, I like to tell them they get it right, too. Funny, wrong comes up more often than right. But, the positive thing is they're trying, some of them, and some of them are just very trying. But so I come to activism quite honestly. I walked my first picket line in 1969 when I was 7 years old. Wow. By the time I was 12, I was being dragged out of classrooms by my ear for standing up in the classroom and telling teachers that they weren't allowed to hit my classmates. I went to the University of Wisconsin-Madison, which was a hotbed of the anti-Vietnam War protests and had a really strong culture of protest. And also, though, and it's interesting because Wisconsin is really got a really strong thing about how activism and academia and the government can work together to make lives better. And that's something that you see very rarely around the world. So I come to this from that perspective of I can work within a system to try to break down the barriers that are in the system, because as we're all quite aware, trans people particularly, as a historically marginalized community, we know that we spend most of our lives on the outside looking in. Institutions and governments were set up by middle-class and wealthy white men for the benefit of middle-class and wealthy white men. And I absolutely love, and also being from the Midwest and being an American, I don't have that same reservation about speaking my mind that a lot of British people do.
Yeah.
And it's great fun to be that person in the room who just speaks up and says, no, you got it wrong. You need to actually care about these people. And so that's kind of in a nutshell how I come at what I do.
I think that's fantastic. I think, you're absolutely right. We need the people that are kind of willing to stand up and sort of point out when something's not right, or something is actually the opposite way, if someone's intentionally trying to do harm, which is something that I know that I've personally seen quite a lot on things like social media. We were briefly chatting about social media before we began our recording tonight, and you see almost a lot of people actively going out of their way to try and upset or offend trans people, non-binary people, gay people, and it's something that we come across just personally when we're doing the old doom scrolling, but I can imagine that as someone who is actively working in justice and social justice, that must be quite taxing to see oftentimes people in power seemingly trying to stop the rights and stop the progression of people in our community.
Well, I think it's been particularly depressing recently because it's hard not to turn around and find somebody who's taking a cheap shot at trans people right now.
Yeah.
And there's always that great irony of the person standing with the megaphone and being recorded and broadcast over multiple news channels complaining about being silenced. It's a particularly unpleasant part of the current dialogue that's being put forth by people who are opposed to inclusion and diversity, that somehow they're the ones being silenced, that somehow the people with the power are the ones being silenced. And, they're not. I mean, it's sad because one of the things that I see on a very regular basis in my work is the vast majority of people have no problem with trans people, actually quite like us, and see no problem with us being engaged. It's a very small, very vocal group of people who, I mean, honestly, there are politicians I've seen that for some reason or another are willing to actually sacrifice the broader causes that they say they believe in to score a point against trans people. There are people up and down who for one reason or another are just so, and it's to the point of an obsession and can be really problematic and really unpleasant and kind of, why do you care? We're just trying to get on with our lives, but there is a small group of people and they care, and we know how hard they care because life's been miserable. And one of the things for me, and it's been really good for my health, and it's a really difficult thing, especially during a lockdown when we're kind of isolated from other outlets. And heaven forbid I sit here on this program and advocate that people turn off their computers and their phones, but turn off your computer and your phone once in a while. What's happening on Twitter isn't actually the real world.
True.
Twitter has this really unpleasant way of magnifying things. People, if you ever sit back, and I've actually seen professionals do analysis of this, that when you look at some of these Twitter storms and you kind of follow them back to the source, it's usually a group of, less than 100 people who are all shouting it, and they're all shouting at each other. I have a strong feeling that in a situation like the current situation on trans rights, if you figure that depending on what estimate you use, trans people of all varieties make up less than 1% of the population. So if every single trans person on the planet has 10 friends or allies, and that kind of will average out, that still means only 10% of the population are either trans or cares passionately about trans people. I would argue people who are really opposed to trans people are only between 5 and 10% of the population. It means the other 80% of the population only cares about us when it's in front of them. And sometimes we get so distressed looking at the shrieking of that other 10% that we feel, and rightly, especially if you live on social media, you rightly feel under attack. And it's often really quite useful to take a step back and go for a walk in your own neighborhood. Now, and I know a lot of people do live in some really unpleasant neighborhoods, but go to some place where you know that you're safe. And think about how that shopkeeper that you always go treats you, and realize that they actually treat you quite decent. I love to go, there's a market near my flat in Edinburgh, and I love to go there on a regular basis. And over the years, I've built up a lovely banter with the woman who runs the market. And to the point that even if we happen to be, one year when we were traveling down here to South Africa for Christmas, we actually traveled on a Saturday, and she stopped us as we were pulling our suitcases through the market on our way to get the bus to just ask us how we were going on our trip. It's the world around us. Sometimes it feels really scary, but actually most people are kind of decent. And that's what I work for, is to help people remember that even in really scary times, it is a scary, stressful time. I'm not pretending that it's not.
Of course.
There's a lot of good in the world.
Yeah.
And that's what I work for. And that's what gets me up every morning. And that's why I keep going, is because there's a lot of good in the world, and we need to connect that good. So yeah, that's kind of, and sometimes it just means step out of that social media bubble, because it's deliberately built to get you riled up.
Of course. Yeah, apologies. I got a little bit emotional there actually when you'd said about, like Twitter's not the real world. I know that certainly myself and another non-binary friend that I have, and also a trans person that we work with, when she who shall not be named made particular comments around women in menstruation on Twitter just over June last year, that was something that, even though I don't even have a Twitter account, but I still seen it on the news, heard about it, and it hurt me so deeply and distressed me, as you said, to a point of I was so riled up, and it was just that phrase you said there, it's not the real world, and that's just one person, and just quantifying that and putting it into perspective of really the vast majority of people aren't talking about it, so it's not a problem, it's just the voices that shout the loudest are often the ones that we hear. And I think just that phrase of switch it off, and just detach from it and spend time with real people who do care about you and who care about others. I think that was a really lovely way to phrase it.
And I think that's just a really super important life point in general, is the internet's a wonderful thing. I mean, I'm sitting in Johannesburg talking to you right now in Fife. 15 years ago, we couldn't do that.
Yeah.
And this is kind of cool. But equally, because of the internet, we're connected to disasters halfway around the world away from us that we wouldn't even have known about 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. And it's important for us to remember that our lives are still our immediate friends, our immediate family, our immediate circle, and those are the people that matter.
Yeah.
We have to take care of ourselves, and we have to take care of those closest to us first. The thing you're talking about, I've kind of made that comment earlier about people with huge platforms mm-hmm. claiming being silenced. That's the poster child.
Of course.
That's, the person with 17 million Twitter followers saying they're being silenced. Mm-hmm. And I think it's, but equally, if you shout back at them, then all it becomes is shouting.
Of course.
It's really important to keep things in perspective. There's a lot of stuff out there that needs fixed, and you can't just walk away and hope it'll disappear. That's the other thing about activism. I have a really strong belief that activism is very much a continuum. Mm-hmm. Those of us who are doing activism right now are here because of the work of those who went before us. And what we're doing is paving the way for those who will come behind us. And it's always a cycle, because there will come a time when I move into the space of those who went before us, and those who are coming behind me will be in my pit space, mm-hmm. and there will be a new generation coming behind them. And if we can leave the world a slightly better place, I'm going to play the old lady card again, and that I've been around long enough to see that things don't get better in a straight line. They get better, and then they fall back, and they get better. Well, the interesting thing is the overall trend is in fact upward. Mm. So for the last 3 or 4 years, being a trans person, particularly in Scotland, has kind of sucked. Okay, it's lots of sucked. And it really feels quite bad and we're under attack. And right now, we are probably a little bit worse off than we were 3 years ago. Mm-hmm. But we're miles better than we were 10 years ago.
Of course.
And we have to, and that's where we keep hope. Mm. It's not to say, oh, we should be satisfied with where we are. It's to say there's hope. Even in the darkest, even in the kind of really crappiest times, there's hope, because overall, when I go around and I think back to when, 8 years ago when I started doing this, and I would go around and give awareness sessions and stuff, and I would have to explain the most basic facts about trans people. And I'd have to explain the simplest understandings of what our rights are. Now I don't have to do that. Now, 2/3 of the room actually has a reasonable sense of what a non-binary person is. Back then you have to scrape brains off the walls after heads exploded when you tried to explain non-binary. And that's only 8 years ago. Mm. And the other thing that I take lots of really positive strength from is when I go along to various places, and I hear the strong voices of people who are saying, yeah, we've got your back. I actually care for trans people. What can I do? None of this has stopped the anti-trans forces from saying what they say. But it's quite interesting if you look, whenever there's an open letter about something about trans rights, they can usually get 50 to 100 people to sign theirs. Mm-hmm. And 300-400 people sign on to the pro-trans ones. Mm-hmm. There's more, it sometimes feels, because the anti-trans people have powerful positions in academia, it sometimes feels like academia is very anti-trans. Mm-hmm. And yet, the vast majority, and we're still doing regular training for various departments at various universities around Scotland because they want us to come in. They want to talk about trans people and they want to learn. And yeah, there's a lot, there's that negativity and there's that crankiness in the background. But people are, and we're still out there working every day. And, a lot of attention is focused on the Scottish Trans Alliance around the gender recognition reform campaign. And we did quite a bit of work on that. But we never stopped doing the other stuff we do. We never stopped doing the awareness training and the work with people up and down the country, public bodies, universities, the NHS that we do. And we continue to do this. We're working right now very hard on preparing a campaign to improve not just access to, but the quality of healthcare for trans people.
Yeah.
Watch this space. We should be launching our campaign in the fairly near future, in which we want to talk about how can we make, not just let's create more appointments at the gender clinics, but let's have a serious conversation about the delivery model. Let's talk about, more creative ways for trans people to access healthcare, more creative ways for that healthcare to be provided. Mm-hmm. We very seriously are trying to make the case up and down the NHS and to people, in power in the government, that the gender clinic as the gatekeeper is a broken model, and we need to have better ways to go about it. We're obviously, and anybody who is on all that Twitter and stuff knows that there's tons of stuff going on around hate crime legislation right now in Scotland. And that's my particular area of stuff. And I can tell you honestly that there's been a lot of work going on that isn't necessarily visible in the public, but has an impact, and down the road will have an impact on trying to make things better. And I'm, like I was saying before, being that Midwestern girl who tells it like it is, I don't have a problem going into a meeting with a cabinet secretary and saying, you got this wrong. It's earned a fair bit of respect though, because you'd be amazed how much people respect you if you tell them, not just tell them that their problem, but help them come up with a solution. Mm-hmm. And that's what I try to do. We do have a messed up system. Our healthcare, trans healthcare is a shambles. We've spent the last year and a half fighting really, really hard just to hold the line on trans rights. But there are people out there who want to hear the right thing. And we just have to keep talking. We just have to keep pressing. And we have to accept that we're not going to win them all. We have to accept that sometimes there are going to be setbacks, because that's how life works. But we can't let setbacks make us crawl into a hole and stop fighting. I'm going to be looking at my 60th birthday in the not too distant future. And as I said, I was 7 years old the first time I marched in a picket line. And I keep coming back for more. And I guarantee you, I have lost my share of battles in my life. And some of them have been really heartbreaking. And I get up every morning and I keep pounding at it. It can be really hard sometimes, and it is absolutely exhausting. And I totally understand anybody who might be watching this, who's sitting, watching, going, yeah, that's easy for you to say. It's not. And I appreciate every ounce of energy that everybody does. And the other thing, and this is something I'd love anybody to take away from this, is that changing the world does not require you to be a Nelson Mandela and end apartheid. Changing the world is sometimes just about being nice to your neighbor and just having them go away. That's a decent person. You know, and we don't change the world a continent at a time. We change the world a person at a time. And most of us don't have the energy or the access or the means to make massive social changes. But you know, we can do things like signing petitions and joining in on campaigns and sharing stuff on our social media and just talking to our friends and just being sensible. You know what the single biggest thing that has worked to progress trans rights over the years is getting people, particularly people in power, just to know trans people. One of the reasons that the current Gender Recognition Act is kind of heavily focused on middle-aged binary trans men and trans women is because the MPs who passed that piece of legislation knew middle-aged binary trans men and trans women. So they could visualize, they could see them. When they sat down to write this piece of legislation, they could go, okay, what does the person that I'm writing this for look like? So it's really important, especially for younger people, for non-binary people, when you get a chance to go visit your MSP and go to their surgery, or talk to your MP or engage with people, as scary and daunting as that might be, it's really important because the next time they sit down and talk to you, you don't want to be an abstract concept to them. You want them to be saying, you want them when they're sitting there going, I'm talking about this particular piece of legislation about trans people, you want them instead to be going, I'm talking about this particular piece of legislation about Alex, or about Becky, or about James, or about Vic, or about whoever. You know, it's about personalizing it. It's about having people know you, because the anti-trans people are living entirely by painting a hypothetical image of somebody that doesn't exist, of a threat that doesn't exist. Only way we can combat that in the long run is to have the decision makers know what really exists, know the genuinely decent, nice trans people who are out there and who do exist, because then when they're faced with this hypothetical example that the anti-trans people can't produce an actual human who does all these horrific things that they say trans people do, because it's not real. I mean, let's face it. Why would somebody pretend to be a trans woman to assault a woman when it's perfectly easy to assault a woman without pretending to be a trans woman?
Yeah.
And real problem in society that it's too damn easy to assault women.
That's it, yeah.
And so you want the decision makers, rather than going, oh, that's a sensible thing to protect women, they need to go, actually, I know a whole bunch of trans people and I know darn well they would never harm another person. And that's the value of engaging and getting in front of people and meeting people and just talking to people. And you don't have to be the cleverest campaigner, or you don't have to be super knowledgeable about the nuances of what's going on. You just got to be a genuine person. It's the most effective campaigning that gets done is getting people to know and like the human being in front of them. And then when they have to go back and make decisions, they go, well, I can't hurt that person. I know them. I would never hurt them. And it's the most effective way. I'm down here in Johannesburg with my mother-in-law, who was born in 1940. So she's born at the beginning of the Second World War. She's lived through numerous different things. She lived through the fall of apartheid down here in South Africa. She lived through going from hardwired landline phones to everybody carrying around a mobile phone and computers and a lot of struggles. And the thing is, the amount of change that's happened in the 80 years of her life is the same as had happened in the 400 years prior to her life. And change is hard, and change is scary. And sometimes when you become overwhelmed with change, and we do, we live in a world that is changing so lightning fast, and people sometimes get scared. And the safest place is what you know. Even if what you know is actually a bad place, people will still often choose. There's the old adage, I grew up in farm country, and there's the old adage that, a horse, when panicked, will actually run into a burning barn. And it's true, because that's its safe place. And that's one of the things you have to come to grips with when you are different. And as we were talking before, we're only 1% of the population. We are different. Is you have to help people to embrace that very view that you just expressed, that actually the world is a more fun, more interesting, more entertaining place when you have a broader view and when you see more of it. When I was raising my kids, we made deliberate effort to travel as much as we could with them so they could see that the world was different. Now, a lot of people in Scotland don't get that opportunity. It's not as easy, and not everybody has the flexibility to just pack up and travel and go see things. But the more you can open your mind to difference, and the more but equally, those of us who are different can be the mind openers. We also can show people that having us in their lives makes their lives richer. And it's so valuable, but it's equally important to recognize that sometimes that fear of difference does come from a legitimate place, and you can't just go, oh, you're awful because you're afraid of difference. It's about being gentle. It's about bringing people in. You can't yank people into your world. They won't want to be there, but you can gently invite them in, and then they'll be happy to be there.
I think that's a lovely way to say it, yeah. Almost like a vampire, they want to be invited in rather than just dragged in.
And once you've left them across the threshold, we're in your world.
Yes. Yeah, that's fantastic. Again, everything you're saying, Becky, it's so inspiring, and it's fantastic, and especially coming into LGBTQ plus History Month, I think it's a fantastic way to just remind ourselves of, even though, as you said, things have been tough, we are slowly but surely, we're getting there, we are progressing forward, and it's people like yourself and organisations like Scottish Trans Alliance that is a major player in that. So thank you so much for joining us. Is there any social media for Scottish Trans Alliance, anything you'd like to promote, like a Twitter or anything, or a website?
Well, we have our Facebook page, Scottish Trans Alliance. Our website, which is hopefully going to look all new and improved within the next couple of months. We've been working hard behind the scenes to make it prettier, because the one out there right now is Canadian. But that's www.scottishtrans.org, and we're on Twitter at Scottish Trans. And welcome connection, quite pleased, and we still also do things like email and talk on the phone and just engage with people any old way you want to talk to us. We're open for it, and we're quite pleased. We genuinely, sometimes, because a good number of us are sort of, I call myself a policy nerd, and we are policy nerds, but we're also very much about trying to do as much community engagement as well, because we want, first of all, it's no good being a policy nerd if you don't know what it is what the community you're supposed to be speaking for wants. So no, we love to engage with people. We're happy to hear opinions, and we're also quite comfortable and happy if people want to tell us we're getting it wrong. Be nice about it. You don't have to shout. We do listen. But yeah, we're, love to stay in touch as much as possible. And absolute pleasure. I'm really grateful for you inviting me along tonight, whatever it is that, I don't know, with all the time differences, I've totally lost track of life.
Absolutely. Well, again, Becky, thank you so much for your time. And yeah, we really do encourage all of our watchers/listeners to go and follow Scottish Trans Alliance and keep up to date with all the magnificent work they're doing.
Well, thank you very much. It's been my absolute pleasure.
So another charity making fantastic movements in our community here in Scotland is the fabulous Pink Saltire, and I'm so lucky to be joined by two folks from Pink Saltire tonight. We have the lovely Dom and also the lovely Becca. So if you'd like to give everyone a wee wave, because we'll see you on now.
Hello.
Hello.
We'll start off just kind of one at a time. Whoever would like to go first, I don't mind. How did you come to be part of Pink Saltire, and what is it that you do with Pink Saltire? Dom first.
Well, I'm based in Fife, so I am basically Pink Saltire's home territory, because Pink Saltire is based in Fife, but I knew their involvement in Fife Pride. I'd been to a couple of events and I'd seen Pink Saltire at a few other Pride and other events that I was at, but I volunteered with Our Story Scotland, doing queer heritage, queer history, interviewing, and Stuart Duffy from Pink Saltire approached me to see about doing a podcast for 50 years of rainbow activism, and that was a year ago last week. And ever since then, I have been doing podcasts, interviews. I headed part of the Rainbow Responders Project, which was a nationwide mental health programme for LGBTI plus people during lockdown. And since that came to a close, we've been presenting the findings of that. I'm still working with everybody that contributed and had an involvement. It's been great turnout and great to see people's capacity build and the relationships that they've made. And it just goes from strength to strength. And then right now, I am now doing a counselling service. I'm a trained counsellor, and I am offering LGBTI Fifers free counselling. And that's taken off just now. We're trying to make connections with all services that provide care or support or COVID aid to the community, just to make sure that the LGBTI community isn't left out of that, and that everybody's well trained and knows how to get rid of those barriers so we don't have to do the work, just so we can be a bit more inclusive and we build back better, as they say, out of lockdown and all the rest of it. But that's my big bio. That's my big involvement.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Dom. And Becca?
Yeah, mine was a weird one, actually. So whenever the first lockdown happened, I was I basically lost my job, everything. I was one of the ones back home, going on the dole. And I seen an advert for Pink Saltire who were looking for helpers for rainbow responders, and they needed to have like a background in mental health and mental health training, which I did not have, but I thought, I am desperate and I'm going to blag. So I had a job interview with Stuart, and to be honest, my background for the past 5-6 years has been entrepreneurship, but also a lot of digital marketing. So whenever I didn't get the job, because I think we all knew it was quite a stretch, Stuart gave me a call and said, I have a budget to do some marketing. So I helped do the marketing for the Rainbow Responders project. And then, I fell in love with the team. I fell in love with what they were doing. So when things started to pick up for me, I was still donating time to help Pink Saltire with some of their bits and pieces. And now I'm back again for about 4 months helping them. And it's mainly just producing a long-term plan so that digitally Pink Saltire has the resource and the ability to reach anyone and everyone in COVID, because as we know and what we've learned from COVID, whether it's in the LGBT plus community or beyond, is everyone needs to be catered for when it comes to digitally being connected and being online and getting resources and help that they need. So that's the big plan for me, is to work with the team at Pink Saltire to make sure that we're ticking every single box.
Amazing. Yes, many boxes are needing ticked.
That is me.
No, many boxes are needing ticked, unfortunately. And as you said, Dom, I think there's a tendency for marginalised groups like ours often do get left behind in terms of the bigger picture in society. So I think it's really great that Pink Saltire are not letting lockdown come in between the work that you do and the community. What are some main challenges that Pink Saltire has came up against for either individually or as a organisation, and how has the organisation managed to get through that and be resilient and still be able to reach out to the community that so desperately needs the work that you do? Again, I'll just come to you first, Dom.
Oh, I'm not sure where to start. Not that there's lots of challenges. It's not that there's lots of challenges specifically for Pink Saltire, but it's a challenging time. And I think that for us, having our enthusiasm and our no, we can still do this during lockdown. We can still do this during ever-changing circumstances, new strains, vaccines, lockdowns, partial lockdowns. We can still do it. We can still deliver services. We can still use this as an opportunity to, like what you're saying, train other services, embed ourselves in other communities, and kind of overlap, and how we've all got that in common right now. We're all in different boats, as they say, but the same storm. But we should maybe find a harbour and kind of do some work together while the seas are a bit choppy. And that's really what we've been doing. And the biggest challenge to that is I don't want to say convincing people that it's possible, but maybe saying don't be too stuck on the challenges and see what can be achieved, what's worthwhile right now. It might be a challenge, yeah, but the ends will justify the means. But that's been the main challenge for me, working for Pink Saltire, is like saying, no, we can still do this. Let's get on. Let's keep it going. Why not?
Absolutely. I think there's been a lot of discussion over the last year or so in terms of what is essential work. And I use the air bunnies because, of course, your postal service is essential, all healthcare is essential, all education, all these things are essential. And so are charities like Pink Saltire and Scottish Trans Alliance, Becky Kaufman, who we were chatting with earlier. It's that, in my opinion, is suicide prevention, it's mental health improvement, it's community building, it's all of these things. It's not just as simple as essential, not essential in terms of being in person, you know. Sorry, I was kind of got caught up in what you were saying there, Dom, but Becca, I don't know if you would agree with Dom and myself, or if you have anything else to add.
Yeah, totally. I think my eyes were completely open because I have mum and dad help me out, loving, understanding family around me. And I think the biggest thing for me when I started working for Pink Saltire was like the hard truths, you know. I think there's so many LGBT plus people that see things in the news and they are aware of what's going on, but they're too afraid to delve deep into what some of the real issues and challenges are. And I, for one, it's not that I wasn't that person, but I didn't really even know where to access that kind of information. So whenever I started working with Stuart and the Rainbow Responders project in particular, it was a case of people are actually dying. There are people who are going back home where they're not welcome and their mental health is dipping and they don't have the resources. And there's so many underrepresented, teeny tiny groups in us as a community that no one even stops to think are any, I don't know, are just still just the exact same as us, daily struggles, daily issues, and there's no resource there for them to go to. So that for me was a huge eye-opener. How to just cut all those lies and say, no, you are important, of course you are, no matter who you are, where you're from, what you identify as. You know, these LGBT plus services are uniquely out there for you, and whether you feel a little bit down day by day and you're starting to notice changes in your behavior and your sleeping pattern, your diet, anything, you know, that's why we're here. And even if it's, as Dom had put it, was for a little mental health MOT, which can lead to bigger things and bigger discussions, you know, that's why we're here. So I think the biggest challenge for me is giving all the projects that we do enough attention and making them really accessible for anyone and everyone in the kind of language that we use. Because you don't want to scare people and constantly bog them down. But equally, you know, you want to just show that we're here as well from my marketing side.
Yes, Becca, absolutely. That's totally right. And I think what you were also saying about not just necessarily for the big crises, again, I say big because it's different for everyone, but I think sometimes you know, our community is so, I've said this and I feel like every interview, but our community is showing time and time again how resilient we are. You know, it's things are in a slow, gradual incline, but then there are certain parts of it that feel like they're on a decline, and then it feels like gets better year by year, day by day. It seems to be different. So I think it's great that Pink Saltire people, even just individuals such as yourselves, have got that kind of drive to really help people, whether it's, you know, a complete catastrophic week that they've had, or just actually I'm feeling a little bit down and I need to talk to someone. It's great to have those in between steps as well.
We undervalue our own worth, simply as that, because we've been taught that. We've been taught not to hide who we are and not to be proud. And then there's that we're told to be proud as well. So should we hide all those things, all our worries and all those things that maybe mean our resilience isn't as tough as Mr. White, cis, het, able-bodied Joe Blogs, as trying to recognise that, like, we are resilient, but when something hits us, it can hit us in a unique way, and we need a unique response to that. And I don't want to get the mainstream services versus the like community services, but there is a need for both. There's a need for balance there, and it's not one versus the other. Just to complement everything that Becca said and everything that you just said, Alex, it's not one size fits all, is it?
Absolutely not. When it hits us uniquely, it hits us in the charisma, uniqueness, nerve and talent. It feels like it really.
Come on, Lawrence Cheney.
Yes, come on, Lawrence Cheney. And of course, also Dundee's very own Ellie Diamond as well. Like, we are rooting for Ellie Diamond, absolutely. But being a West Coaster, I'm like just slightly inching towards Lawrence Cheney. Yes. But Ellie Diamond, I love you. Like, Ellie Diamond's actually worked with us for the Hear Me Out project as well. She came to McManus Galleries and did a whole presentation about how she got into drag and some of the personal reasons behind getting into drag, which was really beautiful. And then also some like little tips and tricks on like how she makes outfits and stuff. And it was really interesting. And particularly because with it being LGBT History Month, we know that a lot of our pioneers for our community were the drag artists, they were the gender non-conforming people, they were the folk that lived out with the binary, coloured outside the lines and all of that. In terms of LGBT History Month, do either of you have a favourite part of the month or a favourite part, of why we have LGBT History Month? Is there a favourite part of LGBT history that you think, yes, that's the one thing that I love about our history or anything? I'll go to you, Dom.
I'll have a lot to say, I'm sorry.
No, please do.
I love the idea of History Month, but some of us, me included, do it all year round. And I think there needs to be more space for that. And I am going to be a bit confrontational when I say that when we have Queer History Month, we're ghettoing ourselves off. So we're given the mainstream, like museums, archives, they're getting a day off. They're getting to say, oh, well, we're entitled to centre cis, white, straight stories in our history because they've got History Month, or we've got Black History Month, or we've got even like the Homeless Museum now, and the Vagina Museum, and it needs to be a real queering of these big national museums, these big campaigns like History in Schools, like Historic Environment Scotland have done some amazing work. The Scottish Civic Trust do some amazing work with minorities, not just the LGBT community, but like Glasgow Disability Alliance, asylum seeking networks in Glasgow and on the West Coast. And for me, I just live queer history every day. It's just that I'm making queer history. We're making queer history right now. This is going to be on the record. This is going to be, this is it. This is a part of queer history. And I suppose to go right round, that's what I like about History Month, is the events and getting to meet people and interactions with audience and I've got the privilege of reading LGBT like stories to people, and when you read lived experience from somebody 30, 40 years ago, and there's a 15-year-old in the audience that just gets it because it's the language that they use to interface with the world. And when you see that on somebody's face, I would just want to jump up and down and say, can I do this every day, not just February, all the time? So yeah, that's my bit. It has to be, we should have like Queer History Fridays. Every Friday should be Queer History, and we should do that across the UK, so it's not just 1 month.
It's funny you say that. I used to do work with a high school in Falkirk, Denny High School, really brilliant high school for kind of creative work. And they had anyway, I don't know if they still do, I've not worked there obviously in a while, but they used to do Purple Friday every single Friday. And like all the staff and like students were encouraged to wear purple. There was like a little table that everyone could meet at lunchtime to talk about being LGBTQ. They could just kind of go and like bring along a friend. It was for allies as well. And I just thought it was just so, and I came in like, I was like Alice in Wonderland, like, oh my gosh. They were like, it's just normal, we've done this for like years. But again, it was like, I'm not that old, right? Like I was at high school not that long ago, and this would have been like a no-go. So I think it is, even just for one school in Scotland to be doing that is such a massive improvement from even like 10 years ago. You know, it's fantastic. Becca, do you have a favourite part of History Month or favourite part of queer history that you like to think about?
Oh, you know what? It's so funny. Again, just from working with Pink Sauter and getting to know Dom, I'm just like, my mind is blown, like absolutely blown about the information out there that I've never even thought about looking at before. I think honestly, my only gateway into the history of LGBT plus was like my aunt is gay and she came out in the 70s and she was a minister's daughter, which was totally nuts and unheard of. And even just, you know, when I came out and we would sit and have pizza and a couple of beers around her house, literally just hearing her stories, I was just, it's nuts. So she was telling me about all these clubs and stuff and sneaking at the house and having to hide this for so many years. I know that way. I just remember thinking there should be a book. People should be able to read this and learn about this, which is nuts because it's been done and it's been documented for decades and centuries. So I think this is probably the first year that I've just been completely engrossed in LGBT plus History Month. I've just dived straight in, and a lot of that is thanks to Dom and thanks to Stuart and everyone at Pink Sauter. But I would say the thing I'm most looking forward to this month is the 14th of February, when we get to basically go out and ask people, all right, it's Valentine's Day. It's not the best Valentine's Day in the world because we're all inside. Like, tell us your first loves, tell us your first, I don't know, like, well, first enjoyable love that wasn't a conformity to who you're meant to be attracted to, all those things. So I think the 14th, whenever we start putting out stuff and we want user-generated content and people to tell their stories so we can archive them for them, I think is what I'm so excited for. And it exactly goes in what Dom said. We're like, we are literally creating history right now. How cool is that? It's amazing. No one has ever given us this much attention. And I don't know, just so many years, whether you're an ally or whether you're part of the community, just wanting to hear these things. I can't wait to hear everyone's stories. Whether it's a cheeky lynching polo, or it was a classic for many people, or if it was like at schools behind the bike shed and nobody knew. So I think that for me this year is what I'm most excited for is Valentine's Day, because we're stuck inside, so let's just reminisce and talk about our history.
You've just told, I want to scrap everything I said, and it's that. It's when you tell about history and then you get the stories back. People tell you their stories as well. It's that. That's the bit that I like the most about. Doesn't matter if it's a badge or, like you're saying, polo. Everybody's got a story, and when somebody tells their one story, then we get queer history just unravels before us, and I love that. It's so exciting. It's just what you said, and I'm hoping that you might have a niece one day to sit and drink beers and have pizza with and tell her all these stories as well, and then Auntie will be involved in those stories too. Oh, I love that.
I mean, some of the stories I will not mention because they're probably for 18 plus, but you know what, most of them family friendly for you.
Yeah, just like, you know, there's like a watered down version you get when you're 10, and then come back when you're 18, and then we'll go out, we'll have a tequila, we'll talk. Well, honestly, thank you so much, both of you, for your time this evening. I really appreciate it. Everyone at Shaper Caper and then Out Crowd really appreciates it. And it's just really great to hear organisations like yourselves doing what you're doing and just talking about it and sharing your stories with us. We really appreciate. If anyone watching doesn't know where to find Pink Saltire, is there anything you'd like to promote particularly just now? Any social media platforms or websites or anything?
Replace Becca, that's your job.
I'll also type them in the comments as well, like so I'll keep an eye.
Yeah, so the main hub of where you can get all the information and any news or insights into where you can get any help that you need, any support, whether it's financial, mobile top-ups, someone to speak to, someone to listen to, then go to our website, which is pinksaltire.com. And we are probably most prevalent on Twitter and on Facebook. Again, you just find us, Pink Saltire will appear, and we're going to be putting loads of stuff out for the rest of LGBT plus History Month. And I think if we're going to advertise any specific project right now, I would suggest it is all the wonderful counselling and work that Dom is doing. So I will segue Dom in, if you'd like to tell us a bit, Dom.
You can self-refer on our website, or you can talk to your GP and they will be able to find us, or any other mental health practitioner through the internal referral system. But if you want to self-refer, it's not, I don't want people to be scared and say, oh, it's a big commitment. No, come and talk to us and just check in not just with a mental health practitioner, but a member of your community, and see what other support's available. Because if it's not through us, then there are a myriad of other places that we will support you to access that support, because you're entitled to it.
Love it. Yes. Thank you again so much, both of you. I think that's fantastic. Again, everything that you're doing, and we'll definitely encourage anyone watching / listening, Sean Connery here, listening, to go and check these out, because it's definitely worth it. Thanks again.
Thanks, Alex.
Thank you very much.
And that is it for the In Out Crowd this evening. After a jam-packed show, as mentioned earlier, we have got an even more jam-packed, marmalade-packed, lemon curd-packed week coming up. As mentioned, we have got the fabulous Jake Evans, Mamuru, we have Joe Clifford on Friday, and we also have the Dundee-based Miss Peaches. We'll be chatting to each of them over the courses of the week. Tomorrow night, we are kicking off with Miss Peaches, which we are super excited about. Make sure to keep up to date with our social media platforms, not just our platform shows, to find out exactly who's going to be on which night. And again, do bring along a wee cup of tea and a snack, because there may or may not be a wee cheeky performance in it for us there as well. Once again, thanks to the Cora Foundation for for giving us funding and allowing the In Out Crowd to continue as a project. And also thank you to the Equality Network for their support for our LGBTQ+ history event online. With that being said, have a fabulous evening, an even more fabulous week, and that's it. That's all, folks.